All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our general meeting of the Universal Basic Income Task Force. It is June 24th at 6:05 p.m. Let's go ahead and get into roll call, and we'll move right after to public comment. So, of course, my name is David Grant. I am the acting chair of the task force. However, I'm not a task force member, so I will not be voting on anything. I'm mainly just here to facilitate. When I call your name, just please say I, or here rather, not I, here, and we'll move on. So Carolyn Anderson.
Here.
Colleen Bennett.
Here.
Eric Brunner.
Here.
Amanda Detmer. Gina Rosich.
Here.
And Stephen Ross. All right, so let's go ahead and move into, we have a quorum. Let's go ahead and move into item number 2, which is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the task force? SB, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wrote a brief about 3 pages, which I'm going to upload now, but I'm not going to recite it. There's quite a bit in it. Just please bear with me 1 second. And it's your prerogative to read it if you like later on. But can you all access it? It's up. It's a PDF, so there's no viruses or anything. So it's all clear. Basically, I'm coming in from the healthcare side. I do a lot of healthcare policy work, primarily health equity. There's a brief bio of me in there, a few lines, not a bio, but a few lines. Health equity is basically representing equitable access to healthcare, health disparities being underserved population, and the health outcomes of the underserved population and so on. So UBI is relatively new. I mean, UBI has been around actually for many, many years, a couple of centuries actually. I did a bit of history of UBI on Wikipedia. So I wrote this with really more a suggestion and food for thought as you plan out your UBI project. And the perspective I'm giving here is there's some points, and a lot of it has to do with data gathering and the type of work that we do in the world of healthcare, that you are using the REL data, that's race, ethnicity, language data, and the codification of that. And also there are now standards for social determinants of health. I'm quite sure you're familiar with the term, SDOH, which basically states that, social determinants, socioeconomic determinants like housing, transportation, food, they all affect health outcomes. And but that management of social determinant of health is becoming also fairly standardized, the codification of it and so on. So I gave a little background on UBI and health equity and so on. And I put copious amount of footnotes, like 6 footnotes per page. I'm sorry, but I do read a lot. But I'm really coming in from the side of the healthcare policy person. And specifically, healthcare policy, economics, and also technology. I spent a good portion of my career doing that. So please read it at your leisure. It's your prerogative if you want to read it or not. Perhaps at a later meeting, we can discuss it and how it can dovetail with your project and how if the suggestions can be implemented in your project planning. So you have about 2.5 pages. I think it's good reading, especially in light of health equities and UBI, which I'll be very honest with you. UBI has tremendous, this is my opinion, and there's some background, has tremendous potential to contribute towards, at least in the Medicaid arena, to contribute towards improving Medicaid. Connecticut is one of the most costliest Medicaid programs. It's like number 2, at least a couple of years ago, Massachusetts was number 1 at $12,000 per enrollee. Connecticut's about $1,000 less than that. And if you're looking at 750 to 800,000 people on Medicaid, that's in the billions then. So I think UBI can contribute to mitigating the costs. And so please do read it, and we can at a later date, we can examine it further. Your prerogative. Great. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, SB. Are there any questions for SB from any of the task force members? I know it's difficult because I did just forward it to you all, but please take a look at it. And then if you have any questions, you can always email me offline and I'll forward them over to SB, and you all can connect that way. Are there any other members from the public who would like to give comment? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes from May 27th and June 10th. Those draft minutes were sent out to everyone. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? Great. So do I have a motion to approve the draft minutes of April or May 27th and June 10th?
Sure.
Yes.
Motion.
Thank you, Gina. And who was do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen, for seconding. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move on to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from May 27th and June 10th, please say aye.
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 All opposed or any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the minutes have been approved. Thank you all. And I will upload them to meetinginfo.org after I submit them to the town clerk's office. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is item number 4, which is the meeting update. So the first thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is our general meetings. So as you all know, the schedule that was reviewed and approved by this task force was that we would meet on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month. Yes, 2nd and 4th, yes. However, it's come to my attention that 1-hour meetings on the 2nd and 4th Thursday are probably not the most productive because they stifle our discussions, and there needs to be more meetings that happen in between these meetings with the working groups. So really you're looking at doing a meeting almost weekly for this, and I just don't know if that's feasible. What I'm recommending to the task force is that we modify our schedule to meet on the 4th Thursday of the month, and instead of a 1-hour meeting, we do a 2-hour meeting. Now I am open to the 2nd Tuesday of the month, but those are generally the days that the task force said works the best. And so if you'd like to do the 2nd or the 4th, it's up to you. But rather than doing 2 1-hour meetings, I recommend that we condense it into 1 2-hour meeting. Thoughts?
Sounds good to me, David.
That's fine with me. I think we need to also get a handle on how to communicate away from meetings using Asana, which I think we're all still trying to get a handle on.
Any other thoughts on the meeting schedule?
Yeah, my thought on the meeting schedule is more like we have to hit a point where we know how we're going to proceed. And I think that's going to tell us a lot about how much time commitments we need in terms of meetings. And I feel we're not quite there yet. So I think it's like a little bit difficult to say, let's do it 2 hours once a month, because we don't have a good handle on where we're going yet, right? About any of this yet. So I think we have to get there first.
Yeah, and hopefully we're able to make some decisions tonight because I agree. I was looking at the calendar. We have less than 6 months to produce a report to City Council with how this program is going to be designed. And so, decisions have to be made. We have to start working on a draft. There's partnerships that still need to be finalized. And there's still a lot to discuss. But I don't believe that having these meetings, these general meetings, where we hash out all of these details makes the most sense. I think that having these meetings with the public would give us an opportunity to, on a monthly basis, engage with residents who have an interest in the universal basic income, while at the same time, giving out some updates to folks and letting us as a group make some of these macro level decisions. But I imagine that a majority of our discussions will take place in our working groups, which we hope to be able to begin implementing the first week of July.
Yes, and that's why I was saying that we need to get a handle on Asana and how to communicate our ideas and share conversations with one another. Because previously, at the very beginning, we had some emails back and forth, but since then, you know, we just need to have, I think that is the first thing that we need to figure out, actually, more than the meetings, is the between meeting working, mechanisms.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, and I mean, we can definitely talk about that when we get into our next item, but I definitely don't want to be a driver here. I think that, we've tapped some really great folks. I'm here to support everyone on the task force. I'm here to facilitate, but I definitely don't want to be the decision maker on how our working group should be structured, because at the end of the day, I'm really going to be relying on everyone's expertise here. So we'll talk about that in our next item. I just wanted to update everyone in terms of our general meetings for the public. And so if you all agree, I think that the best way for us to move forward is to have a vote on the record, condensing our meetings. It'll just be up to you whether you want to do it on the 2nd or the 4th Thursday of each month.
I'm perfectly fine with either.
Okay.
As am I.
Same with me.
Same with me too. Doesn't matter.
Oh, awesome. Well, this is a really easy group. That's good. That's good. So then do I have a motion on the table to restructure our general meetings to the 2nd Thursday of the month from 6:00 p.m. to 8:00 p.m.?
That is,
I'll
Thank you, Eric, for the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's go ahead and have a vote. All those in favor of restructuring our meeting schedule to the 2nd Thursday of the month from 6:00 p.m. to 8:00 p.m., please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. So Adam, for the record, indicate the motion, votes, all that good stuff. And I will submit a new calendar to everyone. And once you all approve, which you did, we'll upload it to meetinginfo.org. Okay, so moving along, let's go ahead and jump into item number 5, working group updates. I think, Adam, do you want to jump in here and talk about any progress that you've all made? I think that there was a specific item that you wanted to specifically reference. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think if tonight we, for the task manager, sorry, excuse me, something got in my throat. If we solidify who's going to be on which working group, that'd be a good step.
Yeah.
That way David and I can go through, make the emails and so the working groups can start meeting.
Okay, great. So does anyone have any initial thoughts? I think this was all covered in our last meeting as far as the working groups generally speaking. And again, I just want to say for the public that if you as a task force member wish to work on or within a working group, that does not exclude you from also working as part of the other working group. Task force members will be able to go where their interests are, where their passions are, and ultimately where the task force needs you to be. I think that everyone is flexible enough to be able to kind of jump around wherever it's most appropriate. So by no means should you feel excluded from any of the design elements if you choose to go one way versus another. But for the sake of our productivity, I do think it's important that we finalize these groups tonight so that we can touch base offline and get these meetings going, because again, we are running out of time. So Adam, can you please, as the facilitator of the previous meeting, pull up the minutes and just reference the 2 working groups and the primary responsibilities as a refresher?
So 1 second, I'm just going to pull it up.
Yep, take your time.
Adam?
I'm actually just going to pull up the Asana page because we have it up. Last time we talked about one working group focusing on the research and evaluation, and that group would be the initial tasks that we laid out last meeting. It was participant identification, sort of the macro level research questions, and then getting into the weeds with the smaller questions the task force wants to answer, as well as the pre and post survey development, and then the program design more generally. So to clarify, these were sort of the large tasks, and I don't know if people have had a chance to go into Asana. Within those large tasks, there'll be smaller subtasks and things of that nature. The second group, I believe we agreed, the conversation led to the second group being called program implementation, which would be focusing more in participant support, funding distribution, the surveys that would go out, developing the surveys that would be conducted during the program, a community education plan, and those were the initial tasks that we had for that second subgroup. So there's one that's focused on research and evaluation. The second would be doing the program implementation.
So Adam, the only thing I want to say about that is that it's a little bit tricky to have the second group be developing the surveys that are going to be part of the evaluation. So I think there definitely needs to be more overlap between.
I think the same question was brought up at the last meeting. We weren't.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't there.
No, it's fine. We were actually hoping David could give us a little more information on what the intention of that initial task was, if you could, David.
Which task?
It was called during survey development. This was just the initial task that you sent over to the group. And we, at the last meeting, we were just wondering what the intention of that would be.
So, I mean, I think that in terms of these working groups, they're not limited simply by the scope that Adam's outlined. If you are within your working group and you are hinting or hitting at a subject, i.e. survey development, and you are at a point where you need to start talking about survey development, then by all means, start talking about survey development. If the other group is doing the same thing, then that would be an opportunity for us to bring those two things together and find a way to make it work cohesively.
Yep.
So that would be my thought. And again, I really do not want to stifle your individual creativity in having these discussions. No group, no working group is limited to just one thing. However, in order to make sure that we are meeting some type of deadline and working effectively and efficiently, we need to be able to divvy out tasks based on everyone's strengths. So that's the mentality behind the working groups.
Yep.
And Eric, just to follow up, pre and post survey development is in the research group as well. I believe the task that says survey within the implementation has to do more with the actual facilitating of the survey. So the collecting of the data, the physical management of collecting the data. I believe that was the intention.
Yep.
That makes sense. But again, if you really wanted to talk about how you're going to roll the survey out, by all means, you can do that. All right, so any thoughts on the general scope of the working groups?
No, the general scope makes perfect sense, David.
Great. Great. All right, now we need to assign folks. So who has an interest in what element based on what Adam read?
Well, I think it's clear that Gina should probably be in the evaluation/research group. Steve Ross should be in that group too. I'm happy to participate in either group. I'm probably much more effective in the research group. So without having let Gina speak, I think that kind of makes sense right there for a starting point. I don't know who else yet. I just know that that's probably a good starting point. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. You have not ordered for me at the restaurant. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I need to be in both groups because they're the research component. I am already going to work on a proposal, if you will. And then in terms of the implementation component, that's where my social work practical experience will be useful. Right?
But I would imagine,
absolutely.
so, yeah, that makes sense. I would imagine the way that this will work is that, you know, a group might develop a plan or might start to put thought to paper, and then we'll bring it to the larger group. And if your expertise is able to inform their plan, then by all means, that's going to be what we're doing. But as amazing as you all are, there are so many different facets to this program. It is not possible as volunteers for you to work on everything at once. The working groups is a way for us to divvy out the responsibilities and then come back to the larger group and figure out, okay, how can we improve this plan that may not have been created by me, but that I have background in and therefore can inform. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Great. So
Again, Gina, I think I really think you really need to be on the research side, at least for their focus, because we're going to need you for, no matter if we just do a pre-post survey or anything else, we're going to need IRB approval.
Mhm.
And
No.
to really do that.
Believe me, that is my goal in the next few weeks, is
Right.
to put together my thoughts on paper about how to design aspects of this, the research piece, which will also include in some ways, the program piece of it, right? So not to worry.
Right, no,
Don't worry, David.
they're highly synergistic.
Yes, that's exactly my point, is they are highly synergistic.
Yep.
At least in terms of where my interests lie and where my skills set will lend itself.
right. So Adam, for notes purposes, let's go ahead and put Gina, unless you have any recommendations, Gina, you can go into that first group.
Gina, would you be willing to be chair of that group, quote unquote? I find it much more useful if there's a leader that takes charge and organizes the group and gets us motivated to meet and things like that.
Sure. You don't want to do it?
I just got conscripted to be the chair of a CTE research network group. So I'm a little bit chaired out right now.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then Eric, my thoughts were if Steve and Gina were going to be on one group, it would be good to have you as part of the other group.
I'm perfectly fine, however you feel like I can be most useful.
Okay.
I'm perfectly happy to be a bridge between the two.
Yes, and that's exactly my thought process, is that you could be.
Yeah, I can totally be a bridge between the two.
Okay. And then Carolyn and Colleen, based on my conversations with you both, in my mind, it makes the most sense for you to be a part of that second group. Carolyn, based on our previous discussions, I thought you could chair that group. But Colleen, I would like to hear your thoughts. What do you think?
In the second group,
Yes, which is going to be very much more, in my opinion, community oriented, in the sense that we will very much be looking at how to actually implement the program and, you know, defining the relationships with how the money is going to be. I mean, there's a lot of crossover here, like we discussed. I don't want to muddy the waters, but in my mind, the way that I envision this, it's going to be much more community focused.
okay, that sounds good.
Okay. And then I think the only other person that we're missing is Amanda. And I also believe that Amanda should be with you, Gina, based on the conversations that I've had with her and her level of interest. So that's how I envision these groups. Are we on the same page? Did I presume too much? Is there anything that can be improved upon?
No, that sounds really good. I think there's, again, as Gina's been really good about pointing out, there is a synergistic nature between the two. And unfortunately, Gina's got the harder role because the implementation side first needs to understand what the program is going to look like, right? And so I can think of everything from a simple pre-post analysis to what other people are talking about, which is a randomized control trial, which is much, much more complicated. And so I think a lot of this will come down to time constraints and what you guys think you can roll out. And then I think that's going to inform what we can do on the other side.
Yes.
Great.
Right. So, and I agree, you know, my thoughts are we first need to come to definitive answers. Sorry, I just smudged my own notes. Definitive answers on what our objectives are, what we are studying, the research questions, and then obviously I'm sorry, I'm not fully articulate today. I am tired, so forgive me. We need to identify the research questions and then the instruments that we're using. And, that will then inform what happens on the program side. But I also have a list of questions on the program side related to the conversation that I had with you half an hour ago for the public, which directly relate to the implementation side. Questions about things like how often funds should be dispersed and in what matter, and how we're going to receive the data from folks, what kind of supports they may need. The writing of any kind of IRB proposal is going to include information, and we need to know from the public that the consent form is going to be clear, and so we're going to need feedback that we're using plain language, not research language, that people will understand what they're getting into. And then if we're looking at how we're going to recruit folks, right? All of those things overlap with one another.
See, so maybe
Absolutely.
what we possibly do, Gina, if you have a write-up of questions, send them over to the other group, and that will help guide our discussions. I know everyone on this task force is more than capable. And so I think that there's work that can be done from folks who don't necessarily have a research background, but we can start to get a jump on things so that we're not constantly waiting for cues to do some of this work. I think one of the themes that I've heard most when I talk to folks from the task force is, we're ready. Let's do it. Let's start to get some of these things lined up. But everyone knows that we need to be flexible. So there will never be any decisions made without the larger group, voting on it.
And this just brings me back to, we need to have a clear sense of how we're communicating with one another, and how we're going to use Asana. For example, I identified a list of potential community resources. I gave that to Adam. Adam uploaded along with some other things. When I went to look at Asana, I think yesterday, that document is only available for download, so you can't just look at it online. So these are very concrete things that we need to address. I don't know that only, if we have conversations back and forth and documents that we can co-edit, we need to figure out whether that's going to happen on Asana or if we can use Google Drive. Like, that is really important to me at this point, if we're going to organize and have active conversations with one another asynchronously.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that Asana was the platform that was voted on at the last meeting based on your comments and feedback and experience with Asana. But by no means is our goal as support to limit the level of communication through one platform. If your working group would prefer to use Google Drive, by all means, do that. If that is more convenient. If your working group wants to work off of just text messages, I'm not going to tell you how you should operate. Everyone on this task force is very capable. So I will leave that up to you. Asana just seemed to be the best platform as a task force, as a unit, to bring all of these different ideas together. And let folks marinate on them. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to use that as our only platform.
To be clear, I'm not upset. It's just learning the platform and expressing that I have more questions about how to use it.
Gotcha.
Right?
So David, I have a big picture question for you that I think is kind of important to really get out there, which is, so in terms of the city of Hartford, which is what we're really working for, you know, you can go down any set of evaluation methods you want with a study like this. And they all take different degrees of difficulty and evaluation necessities that Gene is well aware of, et cetera. So do you have a sense, like, what is the end goal? I mean, what is the level of rigor that the city of Hartford wants to see here? Because, I mean, I think, you know, that will guide a lot of what that particular group, the first group, really needs to focus on tremendously. Because again, I could see things like doing pre-post analysis, which is, you know, one method, or you can go to the far end, which is a pure hardcore RCT, but that's going to be much more expensive, and also coming with a lot more oversight in terms of IRB, et cetera. And so what is really the goal about how much the strength of the evidence that we want to bring to bear on this question? So if we did, for example, I'm just giving you a hypothetical. If we did a simpler, serious pre-post analysis of the clients that were involved in this, families that were involved in this study, and we found, we found what happened, would they be happy with that? Or would they want something much stronger, which is that plus what would have been the counterfactual if a person had never known about the program, right? Which gets, right? That's a really important question, David, because that really drives what Gina and Steve and the rest of that group has to do. Am I making any sense? I hate to be a researcher on this side, but.
No, this came up last month or the last meeting.
Yeah. I think we need clarity about that.
The burning question that we want to get public feedback from, and particularly is from the city council. We need that answer.
City council. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing that I might be able to help with tonight in terms of thinking about this project is a clear understanding of what our role is. Our job as the task force at this stage is to design, develop, and create, not implement. So if you say, we are designing this program and here's how it will be implemented. In our report that we give in December, you outline those various elements. We're going to use random assignment. We are going to use surveys. Here are a list of potential residents that we could survey. Here's how you would implement this program next year. Because keep in mind that we're looking at an implementation of July 1st of 2022. So, but in December, don't put the cattle before the horse, or the cart before the horse. So right now, what we have to do is just lay it all out. How would we implement this program on paper so we can see the plan? What is the plan on paper? In December, that is what we will give to City Council. At that point in January, City Council will review that report and determine, does this make sense for us to implement? Yes, it does. Great, let's have this vote as a city. Let's allocate the resources. Let's implement. Then we will have from January of 2022 until June of 2022 to actually start to implement these different ideas that the task force has put together, with the full launch on July 1st.
Hey, David, Carolyn. So I know I missed the very first meeting. I wasn't on the task force, but, I guess I'm not positive really what the council's mission is and the goal. And are there certain parameters that have already been decided? For instance, selecting certain participants for it, that kind of a thing. So that would be really helpful to me, just that broad base overview of, the council's overview, and, the missions and goals, just, where we're starting from on this.
If I can just jump in quickly, to briefly answer and also to piggyback on Carolyn. Single working parents, is the mandate. Beyond that, it becomes part of the research team's task to figure out the inclusion and exclusion criteria for this kind of project, which is where some of the background research I've started doing works in. But we also need to determine the length. Do we have the length of time and the amount to be provided to the UBI participants?
So again, working purely off of theoretics, because every conversation that I have with potential funders, I already have secured initial funding for 1 year. I can do this program for $150,000 potentially, and then additional administrative costs if needed. That is what we are working with as our base. If we were to launch on July 1st, this is what we're looking at. But the reason why I'm having these conversations with additional funders and foundations is because 25 folks in a city of 122,000 plus just does not make up a representative group. And so we're attempting to expand the sample. That requires money. If we were to service 75 residents for 1 year receiving $500, our cost goes up to $475,000. And that's not including administrative. That is just how much it would take to fund that number of folks. So, but again, I understand where the task force is coming from, but we can't work off of definitive because we definitively don't know.
Right.
What I'm hoping that we're able to do is the task force can put together a best case scenario. Whereas if we move forward servicing 75 families, which we feel pretty comfortable that we can do administratively, here's how the program should look to ensure that it's equitable, that we are meeting the needs of residents, that we are acting ethically. This is what it should look like. If we are only able to service 25 families, 25 parents, then this is what the program should look like to ensure that we are working equitably and ethically. So we're almost putting together different scenarios. And the reason for that is because in January, come over the next 5 or 6 months, we may have a foundation that says, yes, we will fund this and here's how much money we're wanting to give you. But I just cannot work definitively right now because I don't know.
David, I have a question. Oh, sorry, I got a question.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Do we go when we choose these families? Are we gonna go by income limits, like how much money they make to be qualified for this program? How do we go about choosing the families?
That is a great question for the working groups. So that is what we're supposed to do. These working groups are going to determine how this program should be designed, how we're going to identify our participants. That's everything that we're meant to do. Council, and I'm speaking very broadly because I don't know each individual's council member's background, as well as I know my own, for example, aren't necessarily rooted in research. And so from their perspective, they were elected by Hartford residents to serve Hartford residents. Their overarching mission and goal, Carolyn, to your point, is to serve Hartford residents. We know, based on conversations that have taken place at the state level, that benefits cliffs are a real thing. There are residents here in the city of Hartford who are turning down promotions because they would lose their benefits. We know that there are single mothers in the city of Hartford who are working 3 jobs to support their families. What does that do for the family unit? What does the attendance look like for any of the children in that family, the youth? Those are all questions that council members are motivated by and want to create this program for. But to say that they have the background necessary to determine how best to equitably and ethically launch a program like that, that's why you're all here, because we don't have those answers.
David, another question. Do we do a survey and ask this family, how are they going to be spending money? Or we go back to them and how did you spend this money? Or we're not going to ask them those questions?
Another great question. Yeah.
We will 100% be asking those questions because that's what we're studying.
Okay, because we don't want them spending it on stuff and it doesn't go to what it's supposed to go, helping them as they, low-income families say, okay, I don't have daycare assistant to go out there and find a job, or I don't have food to send the kids off to school. And that's what some of these families always come back and say. So we probably want to know, how is the money being spent, or where is it going? Are you going to the hairdresser and the nail salon, and it's going to a good place? That's what we would want. And is there any training after this? I mean, once the year is up and this money is done, would there be training for them to get a better job? Is it going to happen that way? Because it's like, we hear it on TV. I've watched Pastor AJ saying that income living in Hartford for families, it could be like $15, like $30,000 a year. It's not a lot of money for families in Hartford if they're paying high rent and taking care of their families. David was saying they're doing 2-3 jobs and they have no time to spend with their kids. So probably could be training. Is that something, David, that the research team would look into after to help the families?
Colleen,
Yeah.
as researchers, we can't steer people into decision-making around their future. That said, when you look at the research, everything that you brought up, those are exactly the questions that get asked. What do people do with the money? What do people do with their time as a result of having more money? What kind of decisions do they make? And people are known to make all kinds of decisions, including training for a better job while they have that money. Then they don't have to work their third side gig, right?
Right.
That's what we want to learn. So we're right there with you. I wanted to add to for David in terms of external funding is that one of the things that we'll have to talk about, particularly with the program, with the research side, is that a random control trial will cost more than a pre-post with the participants who receive the funds alone, because you have to provide compensation to people to provide their information when they're not getting the monthly stipend. So that will have to be part of the conversations we have back and forth. And I just wanted to make sure that that was mentioned, that's all.
So I see my role as a convener, right? I mean, I don't have the background that you all have, and I don't have the experience that you all have, but I'm really good at talking, and I'm really good at bringing people together. Since I was a little kid, that's what my mom said, and that's kind of what I built on. So what I would say is that I am bringing foundations to the table. I'm bringing funders potentially to the table, but no decision will be made without the meeting with the task force. As a matter of fact, and we'll cover this in our next line in our next item on the agenda, I want to assure you all that there are no decisions being made that I'm not bringing to you all first to vote on, because we have to take that into consideration when producing a report to council. All of these different variables have to be included. And Colleen, to your point, that will be part of your working group. If you feel that as part of the program implementation, we also provide wraparound services as being an essential focus, then let's work that in to your plan. Wraparound services is something that we can offer because we are connected with every organization in the city of Hartford, and those discussions have already taken place. But again, those decisions will have to be made as a larger group. Is that the best way to go? How can we facilitate it in an equitable way? And how can we ensure that we're acting ethically? Those are the questions that are going to drive every decision that we make.
But David, I mean, you're wonderful, but I have to go back to what Gina just said, because she's right. It's really hard to start the work on a proposal if you don't know your parameters in terms of a budget, right? Like, so if the budget is simply going to be, let's say $100,000 or whatever you just said, then there's very little money left over for evaluation, which will then prioritize a particular type of evaluation, right? But if we knew there was a funder out there that was going to give you the, $500,000 to make it all work, well, then there might be the money to do the evaluation. So I think that is part of the hesitancy. I wouldn't say lack of anything else, just hesitancy, like trying to figure out, well, how do we proceed? Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't know if I can give you that answer
Right.
right now.
I know.
Because I can tell you we've got $180,000, and over the next 5 or 6 months, we will work under the premise that we've got $180,000. And then come July 1st, when we go to implement, we may not have $180,000. Or come January, rather, when council gets ready to vote on it. We may not have 180,000, we may have less, we may have more. I think that if the task force puts together a report that says, here's how we need to do this to make sure that it's being done the right way, that will then give us as elected leaders the ammo that we need to go into these conversations with funders and say, look, here's the gap that we have, because we wanted to conduct a study that is unique and a study that meets the needs of our residents. Here's how much we need to fundraise. How much can you give? And that's how we'll have our conversations. Keep in mind too, that beginning January, when council actually votes on this, until June, we have another 6 months to start putting these pieces into place with an actual launch date. And if we need to push the launch date back to make sure that we're doing this the right way, we're prepared to do that.
Okay, we're gonna have to come up with more than one proposal as, just to have multiple options is what it sounds like.
I would think that that would be the best way to go. And, I would say for the researchers or anyone on the task force really, who's going to join me on some of these meetings with foundations or other organizations who are wanting to help, by all means, push them. If you want to go into those meetings and say, hey, look, we need 150,000 to do this the right way, then you're giving them a number to work with. And that's something that we could hold them to. I'm just not at a position to do that myself. I don't know enough about the program. And I also don't feel that I'm qualified enough to do that. I need to have you all in those conversations with me. But right now, I'm getting folks interested in the program. And
Thank you, David. That's really useful. So Gina, I would say that you are 100% correct again. And then we need the $200,000 evaluation. And then that fits within that, including all costs to participants. And then we need the gold standard. How we would do it if we could do the full-blown RCT, basically.
Yep. And I would like to recruit Christine onto that part of the work.
There you go.
great. So any last thoughts before we move on to the next item?
No, that was really useful. Thank you very much.
All right, so partnership updates, 2 updates here. Well, actually 3. So the first is the community meeting. If you can all open your calendars, I think that the best date for us to have a community meeting would be Thursday, July 22nd from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, which would be the next day that we meet. And I propose we do that virtually. That will give us almost a month, 4 weeks to promote, to get folks interested and to, bring in some of these key community stakeholders. I don't know what the turnout is going to be like, but that's the date that I'm proposing. What do you all think?
I think the date's great, David. I worry that the virtual framework really gives you a really particular audience.
Mm.
You also have access to City Hall, where we can do an in-person at City Hall. If you prefer to do that, I can book the room and you have it, essentially from the same time on the same day.
Can we make it hybrid?
That you cannot do. So a couple of reasons why. One, we don't have the technology access to it. Our partner is Hartford Public Access Television, and they can be there in person, but because of their capacity, they can't be there in person, plus broadcast virtually with some people participating in a Zoom and other people participating online or in person rather. So we tried to do that for a city council meeting. It did not work. And so I would not recommend doing that. What you can do is you can hold multiple community meetings. So we can always do one in virtual, one in person. If you wanted to do a by every other month, however you wanted to do this, you could do that. For the charter revision, we opened it up to elected leaders, and not everyone could make it on the day that we suggested. So the following week, we did another one. You can do that too.
So then, David, maybe it's a good idea to start with virtual.
Yeah.
We can see how that goes. And if we need another one, we'll do another one in person.
I like it. What say the
I agree. I agree. Because then, you know, while you're advertising for it, you can offer an email contact for folks who have questions or comments but cannot attend because of the digital divide.
Carolyn, Colleen, any thoughts?
I would say virtually.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm assuming, David, you've got a plan in mind for the agenda and how it's going to run and the topics and who's on first, all that good stuff.
I do, but I would like more guidance from the task force members.
Yeah. Because it really is right around the corner for the 22nd.
Well, and as we talked about before we actually got started, we need to be very intentional with what our goals are going to be when engaging with residents. So obviously I'm going to need the task force to help me figure out what questions are we going to ask, how is the conversation going to be facilitated, and what goals do we have going into this community forum. Having community participation for the sake of having community participation, in my mind, is not always beneficial. So I will leave that up to all of you.
Thomas put a comment in the chat.
Yep, that's a great idea, Tom. Are you volunteering to help us make that work? I'm trying to think at that time frame what is open and large enough where folks could come together in those different, because I understand the idea, but I'm not sure what's open.
What about the Mandel JCC? Don't they have a community space? Or is it just a gym?
Yeah, aren't the rec centers open till 8?
I'm not sure.
Library?
No, they're not open. The library should be open and committed to July 8th, they're saying. And we have the Artist Collective, they're open on Albany Avenue.
Yeah, but we're talking about July 22nd. So that's after the 8th.
Yeah, library should be open then.
Yeah, the community library should be open.
What we could potentially do is each one of our task force members could take a different site. That way you can facilitate engagement at that site. That might be an idea. So, I mean, it's up to you how you want to make that work, but I do think that I can put together a draft agenda with some questions based on my experience and how these generally tend to go. And that way I can send it out to you all can tweak it, but those are details that we can work out. Ultimately, July 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. virtually works for everyone.
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
And I think too, we should use it as an educational opportunity too, right? To start out, just to, set expectations and let folks know what it is and how it's worked in other cities. And then, get into, the participant engagement.
Well, and that's why if we incorporate Tom's idea to have, remote locations where folks can gather in person, it makes the most sense for me, at least, to have a task force member there facilitate those conversations so that as people are watching the meeting, then they can also have someone there who can answer some questions.
But David, does people want to meet? I had mentioned it to someone in one of the nonprofit agencies I was talking to, and she was saying, no, they don't want it in person, they want it virtual. I don't know if folks would feel comfortable to have it in person. A lot of people are not vaccinated. So they probably want it virtually right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the most recent statistics for the city of Hartford, but a couple of weeks ago, we had 85% of our seniors vaccinated, but I believe it was less than 40%, or actually maybe it was like 25% of those individuals who are 40 and under vaccinated. So we're not doing so well in that area.
Right, and yeah, the senior center is gonna open up, I think, next week. I was talking to someone over there, so.
According to COVID Act now, Hartford County has 60% vaccinated with at least one dose. I don't know if I can get the city level.
It feels a little chaotic to me to have multiple sites and then have facilitators at each site, but that's just sort of me thinking about the logistics of it going on and people having calls and.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely.
Oh, I thought we were talking about having one meeting.
First with the community, virtually, one, for the first
Yeah,
meeting.
right, one meeting virtually,
Yeah,
and having a couple of sites where people who don't have access to Zoom, because they don't have a laptop, computer, or, you know, the
or
technology.
internet, yeah.
Right, exactly. We'll be able to gather to attend online in a public place that will have it for free for them. That's that's Tom's proposal.
Correct.
And so,
Makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I understood that part, but I'm thinking that, you know, if you have a couple of sites, you just want to be careful that, you know, it's for folks to, you know, see what's going on through Zoom versus sort of have separate discussions going on
it will
during
be one discussion.
what?
Yeah, I would think since I created this this distraction, I think there is, you know, you only have a month, so you have to be careful. And I would agree, you probably wouldn't want to do more than one or two sites just to
Yeah.
address that, and probably have some way to see if there's interest before you go to all the trouble to set it up. It may be that you don't have the interest to, you know, justify setting up a satellite site.
Or the hours, whatever time they close. Some of them close early. Or they have one night a week that they close late. So we have to find a place.
I'm sorry to interject. I just wanted to mention, I was looking up through the DPH data that the city level of Hartford vaccination rate's 36%. So I think that is quite low. And
Low,
I, as
that's
a public
low.
health person, would recommend not having any live events with that low level of vaccination rate.
Because I have other meetings on with the city of Hartford and we have it Zoom, like our NRZ meeting, it's Zoom. We're not even having it in person. And we have a good turnout.
All right, then. I think we should do it online.
We'll do it
Okay.
virtually.
I think that makes sense, at least for the first.
I'm talked into it.
So a couple of other things. So I've had some really productive conversations with MasterCard. And so MasterCard is willing to partner with us, and they will do direct deposits onto individual cards. Again, no decisions were made, just wanted to bring this all to your attention. The last thing is I've gotten to a point where for Connecticut, which is a foundation, you're welcome to look them up. It's the number 4ct.org, I believe. They are interested in supporting us. And so at this point, I've met with their executive director a couple times. And now I've met with their board members a couple times. So we're ready to take the next step and bring on, you know, 2 or 3 task members. They have specific questions on program design. And they really want to emphasize community organization participation. And I'm just not prepared to answer some of those questions because you all should be included. So wanted to make you aware of that. They would like to meet with us within the next week. And so if you're interested in being a part of that discussion, you can email me offline and I'll include you when coordinating with them. Any other questions before we adjourn? Because we're 4 minutes over. Anything at all?
Thank you.
Well, it was very great seeing all of you. This was a very productive conversation. I hope that you all got a lot out of it. Again, you can connect with me offline if you have any concerns or questions. Everyone should have everyone else's contact. SB, I did send over your information to everyone. So if they have any questions for you, Tom, thank you so much for having such meaningful conversations with task force members. Hartford News is going to be a great resource moving over the next couple months. So with that being said, Adam, let's adjourn this meeting at 7:05 p.m. Again, thank you everyone for your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, David.